as I was saying, I want people to burn that image in their minds very, very deeply. Because as far as I am concerned, if God was not protecting Donald J. Trump, and he got lucky, and that bullet would have went 1 or 2 centimeters over, that individual right there could have very well started another civil war in America. I'm thoroughly convinced that there's people in power right now, and I ain't just talking about federal government, I'm talking about state and local government right here in Weakley County. I'm thoroughly convinced that there's people in our own country, in our own county, that they'll tell you, oh no, we care about the citizens. Oh no, we want peace. We want peace. Oh no, we're doing all this for safety purposes. But yet no, I want none of them come clean. I'm thoroughly convinced that these are the very people that is driving this thing off into anarchy. I'm talking about people that puts on nice clothes and suits and ties and nice slacks and works in good, clean environment, pretending to living a good life. And I ain't just talking about politicians right here. I'm talking about preachers. I'm talking about people that work in departments for social or state government. And you may be saying, well, why in the world would they want that, Dennis? Why in the world would a people that's supposed to be protecting us and take care of us, why would they want to drive it off to the point that we fall off the cliff? Because then they wouldn't have to give an account to the people. It's the people that has put these people in power that has allowed this to get out of hand the way that it has. And if total chaos breaks out, especially civil war, people die of hunger, people go through all kinds of hardship stuff during the Civil War, then they won't have to give an account to nobody in this life, in the life that we're in right now. And I'm talking about judges, I'm talking about prosecuting attorneys, I'm talking about lawyers that have sat idly by and let this thing get out of hand the way that it has. So they're actually wanting it to get further in a chaotic state. Because people such as myself, they see people like me as being a troublemaker. And I'm not being a troublemaker. I'm trying to help the betterment of humanity, of preventing us going off that cliff. Like I said, they'll lie to you all day long. They'll tell you, oh no, Mr. Jackson, he's lying to you. Mr. Jackson thinks everybody hates him. Proof is in the pudding. I ain't seen you come out here and try to make amends. Whenever I go to my mailbox, I don't see various different letters in there from various people and from various churches and from various organizations explaining toward trying to right a wrong. Why would I not think the things that I think about the people around here? Ask yourself that. Why would I not think that the people over in Kenton, Tennessee, a great deal of them, that was familiar with my life going all the way back to 1983, whenever a miracle took place in my life, why would I not think that those are the very people that has driven us this far off to the cliff, that they are the same people that wants to drive us completely off the cliff? Why would I not think that? And if you was in my shoes, you would think the exact same thing. Like I said, burn the image of that individual in your mind, because that individual could have very well caused complete total anarchy in your streets coming near a neighborhood near you. Because if he would have got lucky and pulled it off, because I'm pretty sure he wasn't aiming at Donald Trump's ear, if he would have got lucky, right now, this whole scenario could be totally out of hand. We could see major riots in Los Angeles, Chicago, LA, New York, Atlanta, that would start out in the bigger cities and then go down to the urban areas. Really, it's already in the urban areas pertaining to the gun violence. It wouldn't take much, just throw a little bit more gas on the fire, and man, it'd sure enough go taking off. And that's exactly what would happen if he would have gotten lucky and assassinated Donald J. Trump. So I thank God every day, every minute, and every hour. It ain't been a day yet, but I thank God every minute that man did not get killed. And there's no doubt Donald Trump is a courageous person. He don't mind getting out in the crowd and speaking his piece, and that's one of the reasons why all these other sharks are scared of him. Because they know that whenever Donald Trump talks about draining the swamp, he means it. He actually means it. I just thank God that God was on his side and that he did not take on a bullet in his head yesterday.
News, we now have a photo of the would-be assassin of President Trump. There you have his picture there, 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks. Again, that photo you're looking at right there.
22-year-old.
Is a picture of the suspected gunman. Again, President Trump is doing fine, thank God, and a man lost his life. A rally goer died protecting his family as well as women nearby, and 2 other rally goers are still in the hospital fighting for their lives. You know, in a time of struggle and pain, all of us find strength through our faith, through the power of prayer. President Trump himself crediting God and God alone for protecting him yesterday. For more, I'm joined by the senior pastor of Grace Community Church at Auburn, Washington, Pastor Jesse Bradley. Pastor,
Before Jesse goes to speaking here, I've already heard what he has to say, and I agree with 100% of what he talks about. Before all this, they're going to try to analyze and dissect this thing every way imaginable, but the bottom line is this: whenever it comes to Homeland Security, Secret Service, they messed up. They messed up towards not evaluating the situation pertaining to proper protocol, and they allowed for something to happen that should not have happened. Now the next question is this, in which, if I'm not mistaken, they'll be called upon by Congress of giving an account towards what they either done or did not do in respect to this. What their organization, and that's what you got to call Secret Service, you got to call it an organization. It's a government within a government, has done a total lockdown on all of them towards not communicating with nobody. Total lockdown. Don't talk to the press. Don't say nothing. Don't answer nothing. Total lockdown until we get down to the bottom of it. Because somebody may have been smart enough to have figured out that this could have been done intentionally by allowing for that individual to get on that building and hopefully taking out Donald J. Trump. It just so happens he didn't get lucky enough to get him. But it could actually be an inside job that was being conducted. And you have to look at the assassination of Kennedy. It had to have been an inside job. Because most of the time, whenever an agency like this don't get to the bottom of it towards telling the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, pertaining to cracking the case, it's because they didn't want the case cracked. They didn't want the truth to be told to the American public in regards towards solving the crime, or the mystery to the crime, who actually was in behind the bullet. Him, just the 22-year-old boy, just being used as a potsy, as a trigger man. I'm not saying that is the case, but I'm saying that with them ordering a shutdown of all communications, and with them shutting an investigation to come to Congress in about a week from now, somebody may be thinking ahead by thinking, you know what, this actually may be bigger than what we think it is. Because anybody that's gutsy enough to challenge Secret Service, they're either nutty in the head or they're awful, awful damn good. And I don't know of too many people that would be good enough to pull something like this off. And I know lots of people that are very, very skilled when it comes to armory, military people. And I don't know of none of them that would be skillful enough to pull something like this off. And we're talking about people that has done 7, 8 tours.
To me, about our faith. This is what we need to lean on during these trying times.
That's right, Lydia. God is our refuge, strength, and ever-present help in trouble. And yesterday's violence was terrible. My kids asked me, Dad, what just happened? And I had to explain to them about the attempted assassination and the loss of lives. And then we had a family prayer time together. And I encourage anyone who's watching to pray, continually pray these 3 prayers. First, for protection. We need God's protection. Pray for all of our leaders, and even the Lord's Prayer. Protect us from the evil one. Second, pray for peace. Now, we have a lot of worry right now. There's a lot of tension. There's even hatred. We need peace. Jesus is our peace. God doesn't run out of peace. Peace is relational. And that leads to the third prayer, God's presence. Our national motto is, in God we trust. That can't just be lip service. That can't just be going through the motions or checking a religious box. This is a relationship with God. We need God's presence in America today. And we can't do this all in our own strength. We need healing in our land. And God says if you turn from your sins, you humble yourself, you seek God together, God's going to restore. God can rebuild out of the worst situations. God can, by his grace, bring hope. And Jesus doesn't run out of hope. So know today that Jesus is our good shepherd. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. It is time to lift up our eyes to the hills. This is a wake-up call for America. We need to seek God together.
Should we pray for our enemies?
Yes, Jesus on the cross, as he died for our sins, before his resurrection, he prayed, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. And we pray for everyone to turn to God.
But you have to be logical in understanding whenever Jesus said that, he knew that there was 2/3 out of the whole bunch that was deceived or scared to the degree of letting that pre-trial, that bogus trial occur in Jesus' life to the degree that they basically killed him. There was about another third that knowed exactly who Jesus was. They was inferior of Jesus, but they thought that if we get rid of this guy, we'll be getting rid of all our problems. And we can go back to the same old lifestyle, and we can wear our long robes, and we can be saluted by the public, and they'll bow down to us and basically love on us and treat us the normal old way. They knew exactly what they was doing. So whenever Jesus asked the Father in a prayer, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, there was 2/3 that basically knew not what they was doing. But the other third knew what they was doing. That's the part that the preachers don't preach on. There was 1/3 of them that Jesus knew that they thought that they was going to completely, totally destroy the Master. And boy, did he ever prove them wrong on that 3rd day, whenever that rock flew out of that cave, and an angel stood there, while I think it was Peter or somebody that come to the sepulcher of looking for the body, and the angel spoke and said, "Why dost thou seek the dead among the living? Because what thou seekest is not dead, but alive." My friends, please understand that this warfare that we're in, we're basically only we're basically stuck in between the middle of this spiritual warfare. We're considered collateral damage. And it's God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit that cares about our lives, that cares about whether or not we go further to the right or we take a turn to the left. This demonic spirit that these people are praying to, just right up the road here, pertaining to the Wiccans, they don't understand what they're praying to. They're praying to a substance that will turn on them on a dime and destroy their lives quicker than you can bat an eye. God won't do that. But their evil demonic spirit will. Why will they? Because they have bamboozled the people in thinking that if you'll bow down to me, I'll give you anything you want. Well, you may get a lot of stuff that you want, But one day there's going to be a payday time. One day the bill's going to come due. And I guarantee you, whenever it does, you're not going to like what the bill is. Kind of like me supposedly getting approval by the insurance company, and then all of a sudden I get a bill over here in Martin Volunteer Hospital for over $1,000 for one particular procedure pertaining to an x-ray. You're not going to like the bill. If you follow after the ways of Satan, even though you may have nice cars, you may have luxury clothing, you may have a deep bank account, you may live in a pristine house, ultimately, whenever it's all said and done with, you're going to pay the final bill. And that final bill will be on the day of judgment, whenever God himself looks at you or anybody else that's in that same category and says, "Depart from me, you worker of iniquity, for I know you not." Indicating that yes, you can be working for Christ, but if you're not doing it full-heartedly, you're working as an iniquitor. In other words, you just as well go down here with the Wiccans and hold hands and pray to the stars and pray to the owls and pray to the crystals and the peacocks and everything else that they pray to, because basically you're just throwing your life away pertaining to your eternal life. Now this life, oh, you may be having it glorious, but there's too many of us now that's coming awake, and there's too many of us that's been burnt and hurt, and it's time for the American people to arise. And it's time for the American people to take back over their country, because our politicians has failed us. It's time to drain the swamp.
In Joel chapter 2, verse 12, God gives a clear word. Even now, not down the road, not procrastination or excuses. Even now, return to me with all your heart. And we never give up on people, because God never gives up on people. Even on the cross, there was a criminal who put his trust in Jesus before his final breath, and Jesus said, "Today you will see me in paradise." So let's be part of the solution. Let's stand up with courage. Let's be united. Again, reject hopelessness. Choose God's hope. And there's no limits to what God can do. The story's not over, but we need to be intentional, prayerful, and just like the Bible says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love God with all your heart.
There's a stumbling block right there that I've looked at pertaining to love thy neighbor as thyself. What do you do if you're living beside somebody that don't love themselves?
Our nation that was once under God.
Well,
that's right. The hope is
us as Christians are still supposed to love that person. Though we don't love what that person is doing or what that person is about, we still love their eternal soul. Because you keep in mind at one time we was lost and blinded too.
rebuild with the strength God gives. Listen, there can be a great turnaround in our land. Jesus will empower, he will lead, guide, and provide fresh vision from God.
Exactly.
We need to run together with that.
Exactly.
Pastor Jesse Bradley, thank you so much for those inspiring words, and we do indeed need to pray. Thank you.
Thanks, Lydia.
Do not.
As I was saying a while ago about the
My husband
young
could come to the
lad,
hospital.
the young lad that was
To
the perpetrator that had to be shot because he was trying to kill a prior United States president. What that individual needed was deliverance. What that individual needed was counsel. What that individual needed was prayer. What that individual needed was God, the true, holy, righteous God. That's what he needed. He needed the same thing that you and me before we went to the cross needed, which was God. And that's what this country needs, is God. Boy, oh boy, the damages that was done in 1988 leading into 1989 after those 9 tapes circulated to the White House has put us where we are right now, beginning with Homeland Security, Secret Service. Now I realize today there's a whole different group of people up there that's involved with Homeland Security. But by and large, the same governorship that was governed that media and that entity going back 30 plus years ago. A lot of them, if they're not still in power, they know the people that was in power and they're still covering up for them. They still haven't come clean. And I am going to say one good thing about Joe Biden, even though he's old. Whenever he says finish the job, he ain't talking about the American job. He's talking about God's job. Finish the job to where the meek will inherit the earth. Finish the job. That's plain and simple. That's the reason why it talks there in the first 3 chapters of Revelations to go back, go back, go back, go back, go back, for I've not found thy works perfect yet, to go back. And if you're not willing to go back, then that must mean that you're willing to drive it all the way over the edge. Now, what's motivating that group of people or that person in wanting to drive us off the edge towards total destruction? It's got to be to cover up their iniquities. It's got to be to the fact that they feel like that if it becomes chaotic enough that it just turns into a bloodbath, that they won't have to be accounted for nobody down here. So that means that they're just digging their hole that much more deeper. Well, you know, if you want to dig your hole deeper, that's fine. But you're not going to dig your hole deeper for me. If I'm going to dig my hole, it's going to be me that's going to be doing the digging. And that's what the American people needs to wake up to, that a lot of these politicians that's been in power for years and years and years and years, that should have been voted out, our time term limit should have been already got them out of there. These are the very people that are not just digging their own holes, but digging ours too as well. And we, like a bunch of idiots, if we don't watch, we're going to be just like our ancestors before us, and the blind will lead the blind right off to the edge of the cliff. And that's the reason why I say I truly believe that there's people today in our United States government that is wanting this to become that much more chaoticer.
Senior law enforcement analyst and former member of President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, Cedric Alexander. Cedric, it's really good to have you. What do you expect the Secret Service to say to reporters a little bit later today?
Well, I think one thing that's going to be important for them to give as much information as they can, which they're expecting reporters and Americans across the country are going to want to know. I think they'll be very selective in what they share because this is an ongoing investigation. However, I do expect for them to give some overall briefing of what it is they know at this point and what it is still yet to be determined. But I think they're going to be very thoughtful and they're going to be very cautious in how they share information, because here again, Katie, this is an ongoing investigation.
Do you expect there to be any admissions from Secret Service?
Because they'll be afraid that they can incarcerate themselves. So they're going to pick and choose very carefully in what they say and how they say it to the public. That way, it will ease the tension off of them and their accountability responsibilities, and put it on, I don't know, they may use the excuse that it was monetary funds as the reason why, that instead of us having only 50 people that day, we should have had 100 people there that day, or maybe 200 people there that day. They're going to come up with excuses pertaining to why that building was not being covered the way that it should have been covered. They're going to come up with excuses. And who's to say that maybe some of that stuff that they may be talking about may be true? Maybe they was being underfunded. I don't know. But it all goes back to being too lax. It all goes back to safety. And it goes back to the people that we have hired to take care of us, to bring us a prosperous, safe environment that has failed us. Now, until we, the people, hold these people accountable, we're going to continue to keep going down the same song and dance. It may be on a different level, but it will be basically a grueling, painful, agonizing way to go out. that the American people deserve better. That the American people deserve better. I would still like to walk up to a couple of those agents that I know for a fact was out to destroy my life up in Nashville, Tennessee, at that field office. And I don't know for sure if they're even still working or not. But I would like to walk up to them and have a couple questions to ask them, as far as them basically having me put in some sort of a hospital for 72 hours because I sent a t-shirt to the 43rd President of the United States by explaining to him a bloody road ahead. Now, this was in 205. The gun shootings wasn't near as prevalent as they are today. So, my statements that I made on that t-shirt of a bloody road ahead are fulfilling themselves every day. Every day, we're getting a little deeper into this. Just like the weekend of the 4th of July in Chicago, over 100 people took on gunshot wounds, and over 30 of them was dead. And that's just the people that they know about. God only knows the people that got shot that's doing their own medical home medical deal towards never reporting the incident, or how many people that died that they hadn't found yet, that may have been thrown off into a gutter or a dumpster or a river. This thing's out of hand. It's out of hand, and it's going to continue to stay out of hand until we, the people, decide that we're going to take back our government. And it's only our fault that we don't hold people accountable for their actions. Because we're the people that puts these people in power. They're accountable to the people that has hired them and put them in these positions.
From Secret Service of mistakes made?
No, I don't think they'll put themselves in that kind of position to do that. I think they will be more inclined to stay very focused in terms of what it is that they know at this point. And I think any determinants around what it is that they did well and what it is that they can do better, we will see that probably later on. But I don't expect for them to be so self-critical of themselves at this point, because that would be premature, considering the fact that this is an ongoing investigation.
Just like them not putting the safety glass around President whenever he's speaking to a crowd like that. Why wasn't that put there? Even if it was just plexiglass, something that would reflect the bullet where it wouldn't go directly to its crosshairs. Anything be better than nothing. Why wasn't that put up? Somebody forget it? Or they just didn't think it was justifiable in putting it up? There's some questions going to be asked to these people, and they're going to have to come up with some very good answers, and I'm pretty sure that there's some heads that's going to roll pertaining to their livelihoods, their occupations of protecting the president. Because as far as I'm concerned, it was a total failure. Just like it was a total failure whenever Kennedy got assassinated. It was a total failure. Had to have been some sort of inside job in not getting to the bottom of it. Because any agency that is supposed to be investigating themselves that don't want the truth to come out to the American people, it's only because they don't want the truth to come out to the people. And until the people are onto that, we're going to continue to go down this same old endless road again and again.
A lot to be determined is that how security was developed leading up to this event, and really who was on first and who should have maybe been on second and maybe not have been. But those things I think will come out a little bit later, Katie.
Do you expect there to be any changes in Donald Trump's Secret Service team, maybe the leader of the team or potentially even higher up in the service?
Well, I don't think anyone knows that. And for me to even speculate that would be way out.
I'll say this: if it's not some changes, just goes to show you that they're all in on this, beginning at the top. Whoever's in charge of that agency pertaining to Secret Service. Somebody knows something up in Washington, D.C. to the degree that I know a private investigator that's licensed in about 12 different states. That at one time I used to consider him my friend until I realized what kind of person that he really was. But whenever I first started being enchanted by this individual, he started telling me about an office, that he was promised this office. This office. Come to find out, this office was promised to him by somebody in Washington, D.C., and he didn't just bounce into my life coincidentally. He was hunting me, kind of like a bail bondsman hunter or a investigator, a private investigator. And he found me. And once I figured him out, I told him to get out of my life. I told his wife to get out of my life. And since then, I ain't never talked to him, hadn't called him, he ain't never called me. I've driven by his house a time or two, just going to Dukedom, or going to Murray, Kentucky, but I didn't stop. Matter of fact, I didn't even look. Because once I figure somebody out like that, it's time for you to shake the dust off your feet and move on. He was on an assignment. And if he could have brought destruction into my life, the person that was promising him an office, he would have probably gotten a very, very sustainable position working for somebody up there in Washington, D.C. You keep in mind, it's not just the people directly that's in charge, it's the people indirectly, or the people that used to be in charge. I'm just going to use Obama for a throwout coincidence or example, that it's still people like him that still pulls a lot of weight, that has influence on the party. Whether or not we're going to go to the far right or far left. So these people that was subject to knowing the truth about the opening of the seal, about Satan over here in Martin that I met, pertaining to the one that masterminded 9/11, financed 9/11, and killed a journalist. These people are still at large. But what's even sicker is that certain people here in the United States know that these was the people that was doing that, and let them do it and get away with it. But yet no, they want to stand under the umbrella and tell us that they're working for the benefit of us, even though we have seen that all these little inventions that they have allowed to come into our lives, instead of it helping our lives, it's actually destroying our lives. How many times is the American people going to have to be bamboozled before they finally awaken to the truth of what kind of cold-blooded, I hate to use the word, reptilians are walking around in a suit and a tie and looking in a bodily form, but in reality are out to destroy us. When is the American people going to awaken towards what has happened here? It may be to the extent of what happened in Jesus' life whenever he went up into the mountain and looked down upon the Jerusalem and said, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I have gathered you together as a hen would gather her chicks, but you would not listen." We may have already went over the threshold. We may have already went over the Rubicon of no return. I pray and hope to God that we hadn't. But it may have reached the point, like Jesus said, I've gathered you together. I tried to help you. You didn't want me to help you. So now I'm going to abide by my own rules and regulations, which is what? Shake the dust off of my feet and move on. And at that point in time, I feel like Jesus knowed that it was time for him to move on. In other words, You've come to the realization that you're dealing with a group of people that don't want to be saved, and because of whatever, probably 1,000,000,000 different reasons, they rejected him the same way that I was rejected right here in Northwest Tennessee, beginning in 1988, whenever a man, Joe, whatever his name was, I think he's still living, he may not be living, that basically was the maker of the apocalypse model, that the apocalypse model right now is in a museum down in Atlanta somewhere. I don't know what museum that it is, probably an arts and crafts museum of some sort. But it was Joe that built that model for me, that I put that model in the back of my truck, and my son and I went on our first spiritual crusade up in Washington, D.C. and New York City. And from then on, my life has been turned totally upside down. Actually, it began before that, in 1983, whenever two hands miraculously saved my life. That was God intervening in sparing my life after I'd lost over 9 units of blood in less than about 45 minutes, and I should have got cut completely in half. So they know. People up here in Dresden knows. People in Martin, Tennessee knows. People over here in Kenton, Tennessee, they know what they have done. But now to get them to confess it, you'd probably have to strap them down on a bed of on an iron bed with coals underneath it, and I don't even know for sure if they would confess to their confessions or not. Because a lot of those people, they'll take this to their graves in saying that I'm a nut job, or I'm a this, or I'm a that, to justify their own actions. I know what I'm dealing with. I knew what I was dealing with before I ever come back to Northwest Tennessee in 2014. I just didn't know the intensity of what I was going to be dealing with. I didn't realize that every demon in the world was going to come out of every crook and cranny. Basically a dozen different families that was attacking my brother and I again and again and again. And if you don't believe me, look up the sheriff's private records that they're hanging on to dearly. I don't know, they may have burned them. They may have destroyed them, hoping that I had destroyed them, or hoping that I'd kick over dead and quit talking. But those that are in authority under the Freedom of Information Act can go in and look and see where how many incidences happened at 430 Beach Grove Road and at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 3255, in a span of a 3-year period after I come back to Tennessee in 2014. And there's no way for them to cover that up there in Dresden, Tennessee. Now, you can change the armed guard if you want to. You can change this, you can change that, but you still haven't come clean in what that they was trying to do. They was trying to bring destruction into Dennis James Jackson's life because they did not appreciate what he was doing and what he had done, and they did not want biblical Bible prophecy to be fulfilled. And they was willing to do whatever it took to destroy the messenger with the message.
Would be way outside the realm of any knowledge or any of anything that any of us would know. However, what I do expect that going into this convention, within about 24 hours, what you're going to see, both with the former president and the president, is a heightened alertness, a heightened awareness, and you're probably going to see more law enforcement and public safety personnel in those locations, merely because of what happened on yesterday.
Really?
Because
is that what's
there
going to
is
happen?
going to
Really?
be a heightened alert.
We didn't know that.
Because of what's going on out in
We didn't know that
right now, politically.
Cedric, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Katie.
And coming up next, what leaders of foreign governments are doing in the wake of the attempt on former President Trump's life.
And in the meantime, they're steadily digging and pawing and covering up their tracks, hoping that nobody exposes them, hoping that nobody exposes.
Assassination.
You know, I'm fascinated by all this, I really am, but I'm fascinated about it in a horrible, horrifying way. I'm fascinated that the people in America would have allowed for this to have gotten in this shape. Especially the elders, especially the baby boomers. But see, that's what they feel threatened about. They know that they got their little nest egg, their little comfort zone, and they don't want nobody to disturb it. And as long as the American government continues to keep throwing out dirty money, well, they'll keep taking it. They'll keep taking it while everybody else suffers. If you can't see the evil in this, you're either blind in one eye and can't see out of the other, or you're part of the problem versus the solution to it.
See it right here. This is President Biden and Vice President Harris being briefed in the Situation Room by Homeland Security and law enforcement officials. Foreign leaders are also reacting to the attempted assassination of former President Trump. They're condemning the shooting and they are calling for an end to political violence. Joining me now is President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Sure, that's what you're going to say. If they didn't say that, then they would automatically be discovered in what kind of people that they really are. But who's to say that somebody that was sitting at that table you just seen wasn't in behind the shooter that was actually trying to take Donald J. Trump out of the race? That if we can dismiss him as him being dead, we won't no longer have to worry about him. I'm not saying that be the case, but what I am saying, with all the backbiting and all the stuff that's been going on in Donald J. Trump's life pertaining to him being raked over the coals, there's a strong possibility that somebody that you just seen sitting at that table, they may not have known, they may not have been the ones that actually done it, but they probably know the ones that was in behind it. If that be the case, we may not never know. We may not never know the whole truth. It may take us going to heaven one day and hearing God bring out the truth towards what actually occurred and who was in behind that assassination plot. Assassination attempt. I still think, going back to January the 6th, pertaining to the riots, I still think that both of them, Democrats and Republicans, was in behind that free-for-all, hoping that it would get out of hand and hoping that it would turn into something, once more creating a diversion. That way, those that are either in power or have been in power won't have to give a full an account to the American people. That if we can create this problem pertaining to this diversion, we can go on with our lives and we can live on whatever island that we want to live on. We can live in that vacation home. We can do this, we can do that. Knowing that they have taken advantage of we the people. Just like Dick Cheney going into power, being valued at $4 million during young Bush's administration, and coming out being well worth over $40 million. We don't hire these people so that they can become wealthy and rich. We hire them to do a job for us, the people. I think that senator in Kentucky, I think he's worth over $400 million. And a lot of those politicians are worth that kind of money. They're worth more money by staying in politics than they would be if they had a rock group like Pink Floyd. Yeah. So you tell me that they hadn't smartened up in how to dress up, cut their hair, put on some nice clothing, and work in a nice environment. Just like a lot of the preachers. They're not in it for the glory of God. They're in it for the glory of themselves, because they want to hear the people. And they, on Sunday after the service is over, they want to shake that person's hand and hear that person say, "Well, you done a good job this time, Pastor. That was an awful good service. I'll see you again next Sunday." And it just repeats itself. again and again and again. Like I said, if the American people does not awaken to this BS, it's only going to steadily increase, and there's not going to be no solutions to the problems. And one day, whenever we all wind up in heaven, and you got your granddaughter or your grandson or your great-granddaughter or your great-grandson tugging on your coattail, asking you, why did you let this happen? That could very well be the very thing that prevents from you going to heaven. And if you don't go to heaven, there's only one other place to go. You're not going to be in limbo. You either go to heaven or you go to hell.
Richard Haas, thank you so much for joining us. We spoke a moment ago with Ian Bremmer, and we mentioned that Keir Starmer had spoken to former President Trump. What are international leaders doing now with this attempted assassination to prepare for what's next in their relationship with the United States?
Well, in terms of what's next in the relationship, I don't think this in and of itself changes the basics. I think their immediate reaction, perhaps with the exception of Russia, is a sense of shock and horror. It reinforces their view that there's something amiss here in terms of polarization and violence. That was already a take they had on the United States. They're obviously most focused on who's going to be the next president. So this week, the Republican convention, whether President Biden is going to stay in the race, if not, who's the nominee, and most important, who's going to win in November, and whether you're going to have, if you will, more continuity or more change. And that focus isn't altered by this.
The political instability here, the political violence, the anger, the division, the feeling of retribution.
But in reality, subconsciously speaking, they're not waiting for the next president. They're waiting for the destruction of the American people. You keep in mind, it was one of the Russian presidents who spewed out a statement that we will take the American people over and never fire a shot. In other words, they're after us, the same as Al-Qaeda, or the same as the Taliban. They're wanting to see the destruction of America. So in reality, they're really not wanting to see who the next available president's going to be or who's going to be nominated. They're waiting for our destruction. Who has tainted this way? Has it been the true born-again Christians? I don't think so. I think it's been the make-believers, the cold-hearted, the walking reptilians, basically. Those that was crafty, just like Jesus said that they would come in sheep's clothing but would be raging wolves inside. They know what that they have done, and they know the type of mess that they have created, and they have done this on the backbone of the sweat, blood, and tears of the American people. They're not waiting for another candidate. They're waiting for the destruction of the American land. That's what they're waiting on.
How does that affect the reliance of our allies on the United States as a stable working partner?
It's a good question, Katie. In two ways. One is when a lot of, particularly Western governments in Europe, to some extent in Asia, look at us, they shake their heads a little bit. The prevalence of guns in this country is simply something that is truly foreign to their understanding of how a modern society operates. But I think what worries them even more is the political polarization, because it means that there isn't the kind of consensus in the United States that there used to be.
Unity.
So they can no longer have a presumption of continuity in how the United States acts vis-a-vis their particular country or the world. Much more is uncertain, unpredictable, up for grabs. And that, I think, is what is disquieting, because alliances and security relationships at the end of the day rest on a foundation of reliability And I think the degree of polarization in this country, the lack of consensus, calls all that into question.
Confusion. Now go back to the Bible. What's the Bible say about confusion? Who's the author of confusion? Is it God? Or is it Satan? The Bible explicitly says again and again and again that evil, Satan, is the author of confusion. As long as they can keep us confused, they can keep us divided. As long as they can keep us divided, they can keep us fighting against ourselves. What's the big picture? What's the big plan? The big plan is to bring America down to its knees. Destroy her. What is a better way to bring destruction into the American land is to let us start fighting amongst one another, because they know just about everybody and their brother has firearms. Well, we're going to have to create something that's going to get them to fighting against one another. Bring in the drugs. Bring in the guns. Bring in all these other ideals. Bring in all these inventions, to where a telephone used to be for conversation purposes, and now it's turned out to be entertainment purposes. My friends, this has been an inside job all the way. And if we the people aren't smart enough to see it, then maybe we don't deserve to hold on to the powers of what our ancestors was willing to die over pertaining to the land of the free. I'm going to end it right there and say good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our troops. Want to continue to pray for this situation. Want to continue to pray for the families of those that got affected, are wounded, or even death pertaining to this close assassination attempt. Want to pray for our country. Want to pray for the White House. Want to pray for our leaders up the road pertaining to our politicians. And yes, even pray for the preachers, because they have taken it too. Hook, line, and sinker. They've taken the bait. They're the ones that have sat back and idly let it continue to fester and get further and further and deeper out of control. And a lot of those preachers may have already retired. And some of them may be totally innocent of the fact of what I'm talking about. It's not everybody. Whenever I talk about this, I'm not talking about everybody. Whenever I talk about the White House, I ain't talking about just everybody in the White House. But there's a certain group of people in that White House. There's a certain group of people that works up here in the courthouse. There's a certain group of people that are going to be held accountable for what has happened to the American people. God bless America. God bless our troops. God bless our endeavors. And heaven, for God's sakes, please help us all in what is to come. Shalom.